Hi everyone, my name is Yochai Melamed and I'm going to walk you through the EDI Workflows in Alma, the Ask the Expert session. If you have any question during the session, you are welcome to just raise your hand, click the question on the chat window, and I will try to follow and answer each and every question. So I'm going to walk through a question that I already have either through the Ask the Expert that everyone had, or mails that were sent me and questions that were raised during the last period. So what we are going to do is we are going to first of all open Alma to see that what I'm explaining, I will just demonstrate here. And if you have anything to add or to say, you are more than welcome to jump in. So first of all, I know that everyone is familiar with the EDI workflows as it is, and just let me say that in Alma, what we are doing is we are supporting the EDIFACT standard when it comes to EDI in Alma, and currently in Alma we support most of the incoming and outgoing EDI formats. So let's start by explaining how to set the vendor to work as an EDI, and then we will go through the question and see if I covered this area already. So I've prepared here the known DOSN vendor. I used it as an EDI. Go in the EDI information, and this is the EDI information tab in the vendor, how it looks now after a lot of enhancements and development that were done in this area in the last period. So as you see, in order to define a vendor as an EDI, all you have to do is set the vendor with an EDI code, fill in the mandatory fields. You see when you fill in the EDI code, the EDI type, the naming convention, EDI vendor format becomes mandatory, but they do have default values, so you don't have to put anything in. And you do have to insert the FTP information. This is the FTP server of the vendor where Alma will throw the files when they are going to the vendor and get the files that are coming from the vendor. Let me just emphasize that this FTP server, Alma has to have full permission for this server because Alma is taking the files and renaming them on the server, so we will not take the same file over and over again. So this server for the Alma user under these directories, and I'll explain these fields, Alma needs to have the full permission. So I know that some of you are already working with Alma for a while and you know what these fields are stand for, but those who are new to this session, let me say that the input directory is where Alma will take the incoming EDI, and the output directory is where Alma will throw the outgoing EDI files. The last mandatory entry that you have to insert here is what we call the Peer Organization Unit EDI. This section holds the institution EDI EDI code. and each institution has an EDI code when it comes to connecting the vendor. This EDI code should be communicated between the institution and the vendor, and I'm sure you're well known for each and every one of you what is your institution's EDI code. If, for example, you do have EDI code for a specific library or specific campus, you can add the library and the code of this library, and if it has an EDI type, currently Alma doesn't care about the EDI type, but all you have to do is simply insert this one, but you do need to have at least one entry for the institution level. If you don't have an entry for the institution level, you will not be able to save the EDI information of the vendor. Okay. Now let's go to this area. This area is setting up what kind of information we expect to get from the vendor and what kind of information we will send to the vendor through the EDI workflow. The incoming once used to be called as invoice. The incoming section is all the incoming files, and by saying incoming, Alma supports almost every EDI incoming format. We are talking about invoices, order response, and order reports, and so on. Chef ready information. And if you know that you have any incoming EDI that I didn't mention and you want to know if Alma supports, just let me know and I will answer you. Okay, now this is what happened when you open the vendor for the first time. You do not have the checkbox checked. What do you need to check in order to work with an EDI? If you expect to get any incoming input from the vendor, you need to check the incoming checkbox at least. By checking the incoming checkbox, you see that the chef-ready parameters became enabled. You don't have to check it, but if you do, it means that you expect to get chef-ready information via EDI from this vendor. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get it. It just, if you get it, this is the parameters that you can set for the chef-ready. Do you want to mark the item as received? Do you want, if you want to mark them as received, what do you want to do with them? Do you want to keep them in the department? And if you want to keep them in the department, what should be their next step? And this is, if you work with the receiving workbench in Alma, this is the fields that you prepare there when you receive an item. Do you want to keep it in the department, and what do you want to do with it? And this is the incoming, and it's very simple. Once you clicked it, you can receive input from this vendor, but in order for the job that is executed, scheduled here, this is the incoming EDI job. This job needs to be active, and if you want it to be executed once a while, you need to give it a scheduler. It's either every day at 1 a.m., 1 p.m., or 8 p.m. Or not scheduled. If it's not scheduled, it will not run, but you will be able to execute it manually by clicking the Run Now. Okay, this email notification is if you're scheduling. See, I didn't schedule, so I get a schedule must be selected. if you're scheduling the process, you can set up, okay, let's save it and then we won't get this error message. You can set up who is going to get an email from this job besides the one that the currently logged in user that prepared it. You can say, I want to send email to these addresses, any address, or to this user, if you want to add any specific Alma user, and I want this user to get email in case of success or just in case of error. You just click add and close, and when the job is being executed, this user will get an email in case of success, and if the job failed, this user will get email in case of error. Also, you can choose in what cases you want this user to get the email, case of success, error, any one of them, or none. Now, this is the incoming area of the EDI of the vendor. And for the first question in the vendor EDI information, what does the incoming include? So I just explained that any EDI file, actually the vendor may put any file in this incoming directory, any file. Alma will take any file unless its suffix is either .old or .handled. And if the vendor decides to put anything in which is not an EDI file, and it is not an EDI valid invoice, Alma will try to process it and see that this file is not an EDI. It will save it under the vendor attachment, but will throw an error and say this is not a valid EDI file or not a valid invoice or incoming EDI. I know that some institutions like this way of Alma, how it works, because sometimes they want the vendor to also put the paper invoice, not only the EDI invoice, in this directory, and paper invoice in PDF, and Alma tries to process this PDF and says this is not a valid EDI file and put it in the vendor attachment, and this is how paper invoices are coming to Alma, to this director, using the EDI process, even though they are not EDI. And it's very comfortable. The customers know that this EDI will fail will not fail, but will throw in errors, but they know that the paper EDI, the paper invoice, is coming automatically along with the EDI file. Okay. Before we are answering this question, let me go back to Alma and explain the outgoing EDI. Now, outgoing are the workflows that are managed in Alma. If you want to send these vendor orders, you should click the POs here, purchase orders. And the purchase orders has two more parameters, whether you have an additional order number, and if you want to include the fund code. Let me just say that if you want to include the fund code, you can send it to the vendor, but once you take the invoice in, Alma doesn't care if the vendor decides to put a fund code in the invoice EDI. Alma tries to link this invoice line to an order and take the fund from that order. And if the vendor sends a fund code, Alma doesn't even check for it. So just say that if you decide to send the fund code to the vendor, it's your own decision, your own workflow, and you can do it. But do not expect Alma to load the invoice with a fund code that the vendor is sending. Two more outgoing EDIs that supported in Alma is the claims and the order cancellation. Once these are clicked, any claim, any PO line that is going in claim will send the claim EDI to the vendor. And claim EDI, if you compare it to the order that is sent to the vendor is in the level of the PO itself, meaning if a purchase order has more than one PO line, all of them will be sent in the same file. As for claim, because the claim is in the PO line level, each EDI file will contain one and only one PO line. And of course, order cancellation is also on the PO line level. When you cancel the PO line and you get, and I will show it, you will get a pop-up asking you, do you want to send the cancellation to the vendor? And if you click it, if this checkbox is checked, the order cancellation will be sent to the vendor by an EDI. Let me say that if your system configured correctly, claim and order cancellation will also be sent to the vendor using email. So you may send it not send it in EDI, but Alma will send it also via email. Any question, anything you want to ask about preparing the vendor to work with an EDI? Anything you see here that you don't understand? Okay, let me just go to the input job parameter and explain these two areas. One of them is the job scheduling. The job scheduling is scheduled for the incoming job. This is the job that is going to the FTP server once a scheduled time and tries to get the file from there. Any file that is not suffixed with an .old or .handled will be loaded to Alma. It will be considered to be an EDI incoming file. If it is not, Alma will put an error and continue to the next file. The job parameters are specifically for the these two checkbooks are specifically for invoice, incoming invoice. If you're loading an invoice, you can decide for this vendor that the VAT, for those of you who are working with a VAT, will be expended from the fund. It means that when you load the invoice and the invoice has a VAT in it, the VAT will be expended from the same fund that the invoice line is. Then it means that you will be able to you will not see a specific adjustment line, but you will see for each invoice line the amount of the VAT that was taken from this fund also. Okay, the do not prorate, it means that once you load an EDI file, you may not want to prorate additional charges that are coming in the invoice level. Additional charges are insurance, shipment, cataloging, any overhead charges that the vendor is sending with the invoice. And sometimes these are coming in the invoice level, and sometimes these are coming in the invoice line level. If these are coming in the invoice level, usually Alma is prorating the charges. It means that Alma takes the charge and split it among the invoice lines relatively depending on how this invoice line is comparing to the whole amount. If it's 50% of the amount, then the 50% of the charge will be put on this line. But if you do not want it to prorate, it means that Alma will create special line for each additional charge. And if you want Alma to create special line for each additional charge, you need to give it a fund. It means that this line will take in from this fund. All the lines, by the way, will take in from the fund that you are putting here. This is if you want Alma to handle the invoice differently. Now let's go to the question in the slide. Someone asking, I love the reload function, but would like to see an option to reload only selected invoices rather than the entire file. Do we have any plan for that? Well, currently we do not have a plan to open the file and select each invoice in the file in order to reload. Let me go to Alma and explain what the reload means. If you go, let's save it. If you go to the vendor list, if the vendor is an EDI vendor, you will see these two last actions. One of them is view history, and the last one is view EDI files. This will open a screen that you will see all the invoice EDIs, invoices that were loaded for this vendor. Now you can see that when we loaded in this environment, each EDI has one invoice, but you may load an EDI that has more than one invoice. If you click here and click reload, what Alma tries to do is Alma will execute the job again and try to reload the invoice. It means that Alma will delete the invoice if it exists, and we'll try to we'll run the EDI again. Let me just say that by running the EDI again, Alma is not going to the FTP server, getting the file once again, searching for it. Alma is saving the EDI file in the attachment, and the reload is taking the EDI file from the attachment and not from the vendor or from the disk. So there's no need for the vendor to keep the file in the FTP server in order to reload. The issue here that if you have more than one invoice here, Alma will try to delete all of them and reload all of them. So if you click a reload and the invoice exists, Alma will ask you this question. It says, invoice will be deleted. Click yes to delete and click no to continue without deletion. If you have more than one invoice in the same file and you want to load only one of them, and your configuration in Alma is not allowing to have the same invoice number for the same vendor, you can set up Alma to work and say, I'm allowing duplicate invoice from the same vendor. But if most of the customers, most of Alma users do not work like that, you can get only unique invoice numbers per vendor. So if your system is configured like that and you want to load, you have invoice 1 and invoice 2 loaded from EDI, and invoice 2 was a mistake and you want to reload it, you just simply go to delete the invoice number 2 And when you get this pop-up, you will, instead of saying yes, you will say no, and Alma will not delete the invoices. And if invoice 2 were deleted, Alma will reload it. But invoice 1 was not deleted, and Alma cannot reload it, and you get in the invoice, in the report, you will get an error said that this invoice is already exist for this vendor, so you know that invoice 1 was not loaded and invoice 2 was reloaded, and this is how you can work around this issue. Okay, I don't want to reload this one. This is about the reload functionality. Okay, EDI order. Alma claims that order was sent, but vendor claims that he never got it. What can be done? So there are some times where vendor said, I never got this this order from you. I don't have it in my system. And you go to Alma, you check the log, and you see the vendor was sent to the order was sent to the vendor. You do not see any issue in the log file. Sometimes it doesn't happen a lot, but sometimes when the FTP connection fails during the job, an order may not be sent to the vendor, or the vendor just lost it on the FTP server. So what can be done? You can either call to the vendor and simply talk to him on the phone and said, I want 3 titles, this one, and this is the order number, and so on, read it from Alma, or go to Alma. Let me see if I have it here. Okay, go to Alma. Once the order was sent to the vendor and the vendor is an EDI, you can either go to the PO, click the resend order. This will send the order again, and since this is an EDI vendor, this order will be resent using EDI, or the vendor said, I didn't get it. I don't know what you're talking about, but you resend it, but I didn't get it. You can simply download the EDI file to your computer, or either connect manually to the FTP server of the vendor or send it to the vendor in a different way. So this is the EDI, the order EDI that was just sent to this specific vendor. Any questions? Let me just... Okay, continue to the next question in the slide. Okay, the question is, EDI invoice, when an invoice is created by an EDI, the additional charges are limited by type and are added as a note to the invoice line where the order is linked. This causes an issue to calculate the VAT on the correct transaction. Okay, I don't know if you are working with the incoming invoice and you sometimes we know it specifically from the UK customers, where on their hand they are getting an invoice where they have additional charges on that order line, and the additional charges is holding the VAT, and all the other services and the item itself is not holding the VAT. this is difficult to calculate when you say you have a 20% discount on this line and you have 18% VAT on another line. And when Alma is calculating in the overall, the 20% discount overall is less than 5% if you have a medium invoice, and it can be even less than 1% if you have a large invoice, because Alma calculates the percentage in the total invoice, and the VAT is also calculated in the total, or it's being put on the line of the order when you want it on a different line. Are you familiar with that? Struggling with the VAT and how should I fix it, and now I need to recalculate it. Okay, assuming that you are working like the UK customers, we developed in the last month, we were adding a new feature to Alma. Let me just show you the difference between an invoice that was just loaded using EDI. This is the invoice. It has one line. And you can see that it has a discount amount of 4.4 and an overhead amount of 2.4, and the total is minus 2 GBP, minus 2 pound. And this is the additional, the prorata is checked, so these amounts will be prorated in the invoice lines, and since we have only one invoice line, you can see it here that you can see that the price is 21.64 and the total amount and the total price is this, and the total amount is 21.64. It calculates the VAT and the minus 2, that the additional charges, and you cannot split between them, and that's the invoice loaded before we developed the handling of the additional charges. And now, if your institution is working with additional charges and you want to distinguish between which line will get which discount, or that you want to see more additional charges typed. So if you look at the invoice, currently you see insurance, shipment, overhead, and discount. You do not see cataloging, you do not see binding, you do not see a lot of other things that may be charged. These will be calculated to the overhead. And now, what was done in this area? First of all, in order to work with it, you need to go to the customer parameters. There is a parameter called invoice split additional charges, number 14 here on the screen. It is defaulted to false. You need to turn it on to true. Once you turned it on to true and save it, you will see a new link here in the invoices area called invoice line types. I don't know if you're working with all the types or not. Default, all the first 9 are enabled. These are the regular, the other, the additional charge, the shipment, the insurance, the discount, the overhead, the adjustment. These are by default activated or enabled, and you need to enable all the others. These from number 10 all the way down are new additional charges that may come through EDI, and of course can be added manually if you enable them here. You can see the supply for approvals, the barcode labeling, classification, general servicing, binding, sleeving, data communication, and of course cataloging service, which is one of the most charged service that vendors are charging. You simply click the customize all. I know it's annoying, but you need to do it only once, so it's a little of annoyment. Click the customize all and go each and every line and click the yellow mark here. I enabled most of them ahead of time. So currently we do have our system is set up to have additional charges. Let's look at the invoice we just loaded. Just let you know that this invoice had an additional charges. Okay, so when we loaded it, we had an additional charges, but these additional charges were calculated to the overhead amount. What I'm going to do, and just let me show you, you can add manually each, if you enable them, you will see them here, each additional charge you want to add beside the 4 regular that we used to have. You can add up to 5 different additional charges. 3, 4, 5. That's it. We think that 5 additional charges with the 4 that you already have is going to 9. It's enough per invoice, and I don't think you need more than that. Okay, so let's take an invoice that has additional charges in the invoice level and in the line level, and see the difference between what we just loaded and this invoice. You can see, I don't know if you're an EDI speaker, but if you are an EDI speaker, you can see that we do have charges on the invoice level, but we also have charges on the line level, or specifically one charge, which is the VAT. And let's send this, let's go to the vendor and take the EDI information from there and reload this again. Let me just say that if you want to ask anything, please raise your hand and I will let you speak. I know that it's very early in the morning for me. I hope it's not very late in the evening for you. Okay. This is where the vendor is supposed to put the files. I called it Alma demo underscore EU because this is the EU environment, and it goes under invoices. So let's go to the FTP server. This is the FTP server of this vendor connecting to, usually when you go in, you will only see these two because you should log into the Alma EU, Alma demo EU itself. But if the vendor wants to give you to the root directory and from there you can go. In any case, and invoices will be put here, orders will be thrown here. You see, I already had one yesterday preparing this environment for you. And this is the invoice that I want to send. This is the invoice. You can see that invoice that are not extended with an .old or .handled are considered as an EDI file, and this one has a suffix of CEI. Sometimes suffix are EDI, CEI, or any other suffix, as long as Alma can read it. Now we go to the vendor, and we click the Run Now, because we want it to be executed now. Let's go to see if something was done here, and you see that Alma took it and put a suffix .handled. Of course, it put a timestamp, the vendor code, the institution ID. 301 is this institution ID. It's a demo institution. Let's see what happened here. Let's take the invoice number here. The invoice number is this one. Oh, I think I already loaded it. So I will get an error saying that this invoice was already loaded. Go to the history. Go to the report. You see that one file was handled, nothing else, and you go to the alert and you see that invoice number already exists for this vendor, and you remember I told you that you can delete one invoice that is coming from a file and do not delete the others, and all the others we get this message that invoice already exists. So let's go and delete it. This was loaded with the reload function that I just demonstrated, and I don't want it because it doesn't look like the invoice that I wanted to handle. So I delete it. Invoice is deleted. And let's go back, put it again, rerun the process. Stop me if you are bored and you want to tell a joke or something. Job was submitted. Go to the monitor job, history, and let's look at the report. Now you can see the report looks different. It says the number of files processed, the number of records processed, and what kind of record. We have a total of one invoice. You can see that others can be loaded in the same process, but currently we do not have any others. So chef ready order, report task, or journal claim order response were not loaded in this process. Go to the invoice. Now you see that we have more than one invoice line. Let's open and see how many lines we have. Okay. So if you remember, those were calculated to the overhead amount. But since now I activated all of them, you can see that the general servicing, the binding, and cataloging each get its own description in the invoice level. Go to the invoice line. So we have a cataloging service line splitted. You see, this is one and this is 1.1. And why do we want to split it? This is because the VAT is on the cataloging and not on the order, not on the regular line. When it comes to an invoice line, this is a regular invoice line. It links to the same fund of the order. It links to the same order, but it holds the VAT out of this amount and not the VAT out of, out of this amount. This is the main difference. And if you had, let's go, and this is how it is loaded now. I don't see any hands raising, so nobody wants to tell a joke. Okay, so we will go back to the vendor. And remember that I told you that the do not prorate, when do not prorate is is checked, you see all the additional charges are on the invoice level. And if you check it, and if you click a fund that you want to assign it, save it, and reload it. Now I'll go and reload it. This one, reload, yes. Thank you. I'm very friendly today. Most of it is working. Did I say it out loud? Okay, this is the invoice we just reloaded. And now you see that the pro rata is not checked. Go to the invoice lines, and you see the lines, the discount that you added and the overhead. Currently, and I'm saying currently, we do not distinguish when you say do not prorate, we do not distinguish between the lines. We should have created 4 different lines for the overhead, but this is currently was not developed, but at least you have an overhead line, and if you want, you can either delete it and add it manually, or simply leave it as it is. And this is a very big effort that we made in this area to split between the invoice and where the tax will be put, and where the if you have a discount on a line level, you will see it in a different line called discount, and you see the discount is 20% out of the cataloging and not 20% out of the whole order line. Any question? Okay. Can you explain the chef-ready workflow? Let's see how many slides we have. 10 minutes to go. 1, and this is the last one. Okay, yes, I can explain the chef-ready workflow in EDI. A chef-ready is another service given by a vendor. You probably know it better than I do. Let's see what is needed and what is being sent from the vendor. Okay, vendor wants to send we have an order for, let's take one of the order that I prepared ahead of time. Here. Let's look at it a little bit. Okay. This is a print book one time. Let's remove this one. Let's remove this one. Save it. Let's cancel because I want to remove also the receiving date. Already executed this, and I want to re-execute it. Okay. Okay, we're good. We created the invoice. This is a generated barcode by the system. Invoice, we created the order. The order created an item in a main library in the main location of this library, generated barcode was not received, doesn't have an item policy. Belongs to Dawson, and that's it. Okay, now we want to run chef ready for this order. So we take the PO9 number, go to the chef ready input file, see the PO9 number here. This one, this is the one. Okay. I don't want to go through the EDI itself unless someone really wants me. And if you really want me, just raise your hand and ask a question. But this is how an EDI chef ready file looks like. It has the invoice, the order information, and it has the item information. You can see that it has a 2-week loans. You can see that it has a barcode, belongs to this location, belongs to this library, and so on. And let's send it. And again, by send it, I'm just expecting the vendor to put it here. This already executed, so there is no way Alma is going to re-execute it. See just what is the name of the file. Go to order response of Dawson. And ORDRSP underscore Dawson. This is the file. Put it here. Go to the vendor. Rerun the process again. Go to the job monitor. Look for the latest job. Complete with errors. Let's see what happened. It did have an error, but you can see that a file was handled. It is a chef-ready file. The error is something that is within the file since I updated manually. So it says that the wrong segment count. I did not correct the UNT segment count, and it also said failed to update inventory. Items could not locate received PO line inventory, and it happens because this item was already went through a receiving process, through a chef-ready process, and you cannot rerun chef-ready process on the same item twice. So this is also known to good to know. Let's go and take another PO line. Four minutes. Let's see if we can do it in 4 minutes. You already run a chef ready on a PO line. You cannot run it again. Okay, this one has 3 items. And these are the information of the item created by this PO line. Let's take it. Let's go to the file. What I'm doing is I'm doing it manually. Okay, first of all, we do that. And then we put the information of the item, sorry. So we do have 3 items, so we need to have information for 3 of them, and I'm excited, so I cannot copy it. I'm just kidding. This is 1. This is 2. 3. Let's give them different barcodes. 2-week loans, maybe give this one 1-week loan. I hope that 1-week loan, what this is, this needs to be the item policy code in Alma. So I hope that 1-week loan is a good item policy. Save it, resend it. Override. It doesn't really override it. It's rename this one and put the new one here. So go to Alma. Remember that we have 805, 806, 807, all of them in May. None of them has receiving date and item policy. Let's go back to the vendor. And this is, let's do it quick. We only have 1 minute, so it will be the last thing we do. Look at the vendor. Look at the chef ready information this vendor has. It has a chef ready, receive the item, keep them in department, put them in temporary storage or physical processing, whatever. Okay, let's save it because I made a change. And then edit, go back to the EDI information, run it. Let's go to see what happened. Sorry for that. Okay, completed successfully. That's good. Completed successfully is always good. You see that it has the chef ready information. The alert that I didn't handle is the UNT. You shouldn't get it, but if you get it, you just know that Alma throws it as an alert. It's not an error, even though it says an error description. In Alma, if you used to fail on that, we have decided not to fail on that. You see the PO line, items updated 3, items not updated 0. Let's go to the items. See, all of them has the barcode that I gave them. All of them were received today. 2 of them are 2-week loan. 1 of them is 1-week loan. And if this item was invoiced, you see that it's not invoiced. And now it is waiting for invoice. It was previously was sent. Now it is waiting for invoice. And we send invoice for this order. This order will be closed. Okay. This is the EDI Workflows in Alma as it came from questions that I got from you guys. If you do not have anything else to ask, to raise, or you don't want to raise them in front of everybody, you can send them to me. My name is Yochai. You can, I'm sure that most of you knows how to get me, but if not, you can contact me either through the support or through Benjamin here or through anyone, and you can send me email with a question and I will be happy to help.